Everyone, we having a good time? Amazing, already a better response than my average lecture. Hi everyone, my name's Buckley, and a friend once described me as the dumbest smart person they know. That's legitimately true. If you're wondering why I'm dumb, I mean, I paid a lot of money for this haircut. I even choose to get it dyed this colour. I'm from Edith, Cowan University, and I'm a specialist in conservation genetics, which is really just a fancy way of saying I try to stop cousins from having babies. I look at the DNA of our animals, our wildlife, and try to see if they're doing all right. And that's really important in Australia because we like to win. And we're really kicking ass at letting all our cool animals go extinct. But I'm really hoping that we can be a world leader in saving them instead. But when people see me for the first time, they often think more bogan than biologist. Bit offensive, as if I can't be both. But the biggest benefit, and it's a tactical reason for having a mullet, is that I actually never get sunburn on the back of my neck. It definitely counts as PPE. Otherwise, as you can tell by my complexion, I'd have to dress up like this. And I would never hear the end of the ridicule from my husband. My field of research is really all about trying to maintain good diversity in the gene pool of our wildlife so that our animals can be strong, robust, attractive. So the opposite of our politicians, really. Yeah. When we don't maintain genetic diversity in our wildlife, bad things can happen. Some species might develop diseases, they might lose the ability to adapt to climate change, and they might even grow extra limbs. We call all of these things together inbreeding depression, which is apparently not just the feeling you get when you visit Geraldton on holiday. Better duck in case anyone from Geraldton's here. I love conservation so much that I'm basically a species kleptomaniac. Often when I'm about to go into the field, my colleagues will dig through my backpack and take out any tennis balls in case I pretend they're Pokeballs. Sometimes people ask me, Sean, what's your favourite species to work with? And I think that's a bit like choosing a favourite child. There's a really obvious answer, but it's not polite to say. But like a lot of things, it's my first true love. Shit, I hope my husband didn't see that. Here it is. It's our freshwater fish that I've helped to breed and put back into parts of Australia where they used to exist. So let me tell you about how we're ensuring that there's good genetic diversity in Australian wildlife and how we can use this science to establish new populations. This little guy is the southern Pygmy perch, a small freshwater fish species once found all across Southeast Australia. I used to call it the who gives a fuck fish, because that's what most people would say when I told them about it. But I give a fuck, and it turns out a whole bunch of other people did too. In the town of Bendigo, in Victoria, the local community looked at their waterways and realised a couple things were missing. A collection of 6 cool fish that had disappeared since the gold rush. Ironically, none of them were goldfish. They named these lost species the Magnificent Six, which is my favourite Marvel movie. Working with the local government, environmental managers, and some fish hobbyists, they came up with a plan to bring back the Magnificent Six, starting with, you guessed it, the southern pygmy perch. Now you might be thinking, how hard is it to move a bunch of fish? Something like this, right? Seems logical. Well, turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. First, you need to find some fish to actually move. You have to have their home ready to move into. You might even need to do some breeding to get enough fish to establish a new population. And yes, you actually need to look at their genetics as well. So a bunch of us, including my genetics lab, joined forces to help bring them back. Volunteers from the local community started out by picking some good sites to release the fish into. They picked 3 places in Bendigo, including a dog park in town. At each site, volunteers went out and planted vegetation and some woody debris to create a nice home for the fish to move into, and made sure any shopping trolleys were removed. You know things suck when even the fish are getting better housing support than millennials. Yeah, that one hurt a bit. We helped them find some good rivers to source them from. So we picked 3 creeks from 2 different rivers in the area, and then the community went out and caught over 100 fish. Our previous genetic work showed that the fish from the 2 different rivers were genetically different from one another, so we decided to keep them separate. So we put all the fish from one river, so here in the green, in one tank, and all the fish from both creeks of this other river in the pink in another tank to keep them separate. Think Romeo and Juliet. And only a little bit slimy. Just a smidge. To help set up the captive breeding program, the team worked with a private aquarium business in town. We were like Tinder for fishes. Only the caviar comes after the date, not at the start of it. We let these wild-caught fish breed for a single generation, and then took all the offspring to release at those sites. At each of the 3 sites, we released 300 fish from both breeding groups. Thankfully, we paid for same-day delivery. We came back a year later to see how they were doing and to look at their genetics, from those wild-caught parents, to the captive bred offspring, to the recaptured offspring a year later. We wanted to check how well the program maintained genetic diversity and to see if more genetics should be added from somewhere else. We were watching everything they did. It was like keeping up with the Kardashians. Correct response. We actually found a couple of surprises. So the first thing we noticed was that even though 2 of those creeks flowed into the same river, their fish were actually genetically different from one another. So because those 2 creeks weren't separated in the captive breeding program, we found a whole bunch of hybrid fish. And they weren't the only ones. Some of the fish from one tank managed to sneak into the tank from the other river, creating even more hybrids. I guess Australia's strict border patrol policies don't apply everywhere. But when we looked at which fish actually survived the best in those restored ponds, we actually found way more of these hybrids than we might have expected. And that was reflected in their genetic diversity. The new populations had healthy gene pools, even though captive breeding programs often lose a bit just as part of the process. The good genetic diversity of those populations is owed to these hybrids. They're the poodle crosses of the fish world. They're better, they're cuter, they're way less inbred. Overall, the program was so successful that those 3 sites of thriving hybrids have actually been used to establish new populations of southern pygmy perch in the region. Thousands of fish have been taken from those 3 sites to establish new populations. I feel like Saruman with his army of Uruk-hai, ready to conquer the world. Restore the world, I guess. I'm so proud of this story for so many different reasons. Not only was it a great outcome for these poor and underappreciated fish, but it also showed how effective conservation can be when we all work together. Even something as complicated as conservation genetics can be helped by anyone. Yes, even you. Just like with our children though, it's really important not to play favourites. All of our amazing wildlife are important and unique and special, and I definitely don't have a favourite. Not at all. Thank you so much. I hope you've had a wonderful night.